guess I'll take an opportunity while this is warming up to say I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. I hope that you'll look at the things that I'm saying and not take them for granted, but search the Word as I speak on some things, and hopefully together we can come to a better understanding of what we're looking at. Today we'll be studying Ecclesiastes chapter 1, which we have done in the college class already, but it's such a great chapter and such a fantastic array of knowledge that's been given to us by Solomon that I really would like to look at it with everyone, and hopefully I won't say the exact same things that I've said in the college class, but we'll go into further detail in some aspects. And as you can see, we're only doing the first 11 verses. I believe there's so much in chapter 1 that doing the entire book might keep us here a little past lunch. So we will do the first 11 verses of Ecclesiastes chapter 1. As you can see, I've titled the lesson, Vanity of Vanities, All is Vanity. And that is the basic theme of chapter 1, and really a theme that runs through the entire book. There are chapters that focus more on some other things, that focus on the positive, but Solomon in general focuses on the vanities of life, and we'll get into that a little bit more. He calls himself the preacher. He teaches us the futility of a busy and at the same time an empty life. And so first I'd like to look a little bit. It's nice to know a little bit about our author, and some people have said that they're unsure whether Solomon wrote this book or not. I am fully convinced that he has, and I'll tell you why in just a couple of seconds. But I think that it's good to have an understanding of where he is coming from. And so he calls himself the preacher in verse 1. I guess I should maybe get my Bible out and not just trust on my own understanding. Chapter 1, beginning in verse 1. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. So we'll stop there and look first at the little bit of information that's already been given to us. First, he calls himself the preacher, which is a fitting name for Solomon. Most of his books are poetic, but they do tend to have a lecture-style teaching that comes from it. We see in Proverbs he is teaching as a teacher, as someone who is giving information, passing wisdom and knowledge on. But he calls himself the preacher. He identifies himself as the son of David. And he also identifies himself as king in Jerusalem, chapter 1 and verse 1, as we just read. And so it's very possible that a lot of people could make this claim, son of David and a king in Jerusalem, because anybody that came after David could call themselves a son of David. And so that doesn't necessarily say that Solomon said this, but it does narrow down the field of the people who could have said it. And so we'll start with that. The preacher identifies himself, son of David and king in Jerusalem. If you look at chapter 1 and verse 16, we get a little bit more information about who wrote this. Chapter 1 and verse 16, I said to myself, behold, I have magnified and increased wisdom more than all who were over Jerusalem before me, and my mind has observed a wealth of wisdom and knowledge. And from history, we know that Solomon had more wisdom than any man before him. And the reason is because he asked it from God so that he might be a great judge of God's people. And so someone that had magnified wisdom more than any before them, at Solomon's point, he would be the only man that would be able to make that claim. We also see that his wisdom surpassed those that were to come after him. And that is in 1 Kings chapter 3, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. But anyways, so the wisdom of Solomon, which we already know about, is talked about right here. And lastly, and this is the most important one to me, to show that it's Solomon, chapter 2, beginning in verse 9. Then I became great and increased more wealth than all who preceded me in Jerusalem. My wisdom also stood by me. Solomon is the son of David, king of Israel, and he was the only one really that could claim more wealth than any before him as the son of David, as a king in Jerusalem. Because after Solomon, we see the kingdom divide, and we see the kingdom begin to decline. And so Solomon was the pinnacle of wisdom and the pinnacle of wealth in the children of Israel's timeline. And so those are the reasons that I say those, and I wanted to say those because I wanted to make sure that I'm not just up here telling you that it's Solomon and saying you have to take it at my word. These are the reasons why I believe this. If you have something to point out that might change my knowledge, please do that. But that's what I can gather from what's been given to us in Ecclesiastes at this moment. So as the preacher, the things that we can learn knowing this is Solomon would be that Solomon has paired a lifetime of growing wisdom, and you can see that at the end of chapter 1, which we won't really flow into, but you can see the wisdom that Solomon continues to gain as he goes through his life. But he pairs that with decision, with weakness, and with his experiences. And there's many other things that he pairs that with as he goes through the book. We also can see Solomon satisfied all of his desires. Any desire that a human could dream about. He had the opportunity to do that. He recorded the failures that he made during his life so that we don't have to make the exact same mistakes that he did. One thing I said in the class, we could spend an entire lifetime trying to capture one thing that Solomon did in no time. And the reason is because Solomon was king of a great kingdom at that time, and he had more money than he knew what to do with. A lot of people might say, well, if I had $1 million, this is the list of things that I would buy first. If you told Solomon, if I give you $1 billion, what would you buy? He would say, I've got $10 billion. I've already bought everything I want. So we could spend a lifetime trying to do the things that Solomon has already done. Instead, we can just go and we can see his wisdom and his advice that comes on these things. And so, lastly, I would say we can realize what was going on during the days of Solomon. There was prosperity, there was peace. Solomon was not a man of war as his father David was, and we'll get back to that a little bit more. And it was also a frivolous lifestyle that he lived in his weakness and his times of weakness. So anyways, after beginning with that, we'll go ahead and get into the first 3 verses of Ecclesiastes chapter 1. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What advantage does man have in all his work which he does under the sun? The term here, vanity, Solomon uses this word, vanity or futility, which is basically the same word. He uses it over 30 times in his book. That kind of sets a tone for the book. It seems to be somewhat negative in some of the things that he says. It seems to show the negative sides of life. And we'll talk about that when we wrap the lesson up. But Solomon living in a time of peace, it doesn't seem like that would be his view. But as he goes through the book and he shows the vanities of life, he's really kind of answering a question that everybody already has. And so Solomon's wisdom is giving us answers to the things answers to the questions that we might have in life. The word vanity means futility, as we've already said. It means worthlessness. But for Solomon's lesson here, I would say that the most fitting would be the term emptiness. The fact that the things that are vain are the things that are empty. And so let's keep that in mind as we go through. If you replace the word vanity with empty, you would really see a lot that comes from, because I mean vanity is a word that maybe we don't use nearly as much as you might see when you use the term empty. So anyways, as Solomon goes through this, he uses this term vanity or emptiness or futility to describe his learnings, his things that he's found out in his lifetime. And so he goes on, beginning in verse 3, and he asks